and let you get at her.
All right. Okay, great. So yeah, nice meeting you, Howard. You know, you're probably the best near-death experience I've come across, and you know, there are some people out there that sometimes I doubt their sincerity. You know, some people that claim to have had experiences and things like that, but I've never really doubted your sincerity. So not even for a minute. And to be, you know, honest with you, I'm at a point in my life where I'm very confused. I don't know anything. I have no idea what's going on out there. I was raised Catholic, and I have a lot of confusion. So I think part of my confusion comes from my background. So as I was telling Corey, I'm a scientist. Like, that's my profession. So I'm very logical, mathematical minded, very evidence based, and stuff like that. And I know that you had your experience, and you know, that's kind of what pushed you to become a believer. But I guess my first question for you is, you know, as somebody like me, somebody that's very scientific minded, what kind of advice can you give me, or
and explains that every theoretical physicist in the world universally knows that all the laws of physics existed before the Big Bang. Okay? You okay with that? Because that's his assertion. All theoretical physics know that. And he said, you know, some of us call it God, others don't know what to call it. All right. The point is that there's a lot of things science doesn't know. If you know anything about science, which I'm assuming you do,
yeah,
you know science changes every week, every month, every year.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And science is great because it's evidence, you know, to make decisions.
Yeah.
Decision-based evidence, you know, making.
Yeah.
Or evidence-based decision making. Excuse me, I got it backwards.
Yeah.
Anyhow, and I practice that in my life, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, every day everybody uses a little bit of science in their life. Yeah.
So there are lots of things that can't be answered. Like, here's a little one. You ever heard of love?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I know. Okay, define it to me. Define love to me. And by the way, don't bother because you can't.
That is tough.
No, it's impossible. People have been trying to define love for many thousands of years, and there are no good definitions of love. They don't exist. Trust me, I've looked. So, one of the things that the Bible says, God is love. Okay, there you go, scientists, science-minded people. When I went to seminary, the first thing we learned in Theology 101 is that God is a mystery. Humans are incapable of understanding God. So, like, forget about it. You'll never understand God. All this we have to go on is a history of revelation, of traditions, some of which are pretty cool. You know, I know that you probably followed the theory that the big turtle produced an egg that gave forth a sprout of corn for the corn woman who gradually had children. I know you probably belong to that theory, but you know, just trying to be a little funny at this time of
month. No, I know. I read that theory.
Yeah. Anyways, so we have traditions. And a matter of fact, civilizations based on these traditions, some of which have been pretty worthwhile. You know, personally, I don't go along with the Inuit people about eating the heart of the animal that you killed. When you slaughter it, but that tradition I go. Anyways,
Mhm.
so there's a tradition in humanity to define our relationship to God, not define God, our relationship to God, and our relationship to one another. And I have found, of course, based on my near-death experience, that the tradition that works for me is the Judeo-Christian tradition.
Mhm.
And I think there's lots of things wrong in the Judeo-Christian tradition, lots of things wrong. But compare that tradition to all the other traditions, like the traditions of ruling governments, politics, um,
Yeah,
uh, conquest of other people. I mean, human traditions have been, frankly, pretty ugly.
absolutely. Yep.
And the religious traditions, although they've made a lot of bad decisions, like trying to wipe each other out, that was
Yeah.
serious, guys. Um,
Yeah.
was an attempt to get us to be more loving, more peaceful, and things like that. Now, I know I've been on a bit of a rant, but let me you mentioned that you were raised Catholic, and I have to defend the Catholic Church. I'm not Catholic, and I never will be one, because there's things about the Catholic Church that I don't agree with. And my understanding of being a Catholic, my best friend was a Catholic
Yeah.
priest.
Yeah.
There's things about Catholic churches that you're supposed to be obedient to everything. Um, and I don't believe in that. Um,
Yeah.
Especially, I can't be obedient to things that I don't agree with. My friend, the Catholic priest, there were things in the Catholic Church he didn't agree with, but he felt he had to be obedient to them whether he liked it or not,
Mhm.
which is like, seriously?
And
That's not right,
yeah,
you
and
know?
they have some traditions that I don't agree with either. The whole I think only men can be priests and they can't get married or have
Oh,
relationships.
I know. And it's, yeah, I mean,
It's
I totally,
yeah.
and by the way, that came about in the 10th century. That
Yeah.
was part of the early church.
Mhm.
Anyhow, so I love the Catholic Church, call it the Mother Church. And what happened was two Catholic priests, Ulrich Zwingli, if I said it properly, and Martin Luther, who were contemporaries and were 1 year apart in age. One was in Zurich and one was in Germany. They wanted to reform the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church's response to them was first to pronounce an anathema on them,
Mhm.
and then they sent armies to kill them, which they succeeded in doing with Zwingli and not Martin Luther. Um, not a nice way to resolve differences.
No.
Uh, so, anyways, I'm part of the. I consider there's only one church, one faith, one God, one Jesus Christ, and one baptism. That's in the Bible, by the way.
Mhm.
So, therefore, when people ask me if I'm Catholic, I say, oh, of course I am. And I also, when people ask me if I'm a Presbyterian, I say, of course I am. And if they ask me I'm a Lutheran, I say, of course I am. And if they ask me if I'm a Baptist, I say, you get the idea.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
there's only one faith. But I am a member of the United Church of Christ, which is a liberal, use the L word, I'm sorry, which is a liberal denomination.
Well, I guess my other question for you then is, God, you said God revealed himself through revelation, and I guess, 2000 years ago through, Jesus. But my question for you is, if God wants to have a relationship with us, right, and he loves us, or I guess, why doesn't he just appear in front of everybody and be like, here I am, I want
Okay,
to have
I
a relationship with
I asked Jesus that question,
you. Yeah.
and he said, well, of course he could, but that's not love. Um, are you married?
No, I'm
Okay.
not.
Well, anyways, if I dangled $1 million or something in front of a woman and said, would you like to come and live with me and love me and be part of my life. Um, depending upon the woman, and of course, depending upon the culture, that would work well in in a poorer culture. I mean, it would almost
Yeah.
need to succeed. In the US,
Mhm.
it might take 5 million or 10.
Yeah.
Anyways, um, not love. Uh, Putting a gun to a person's head and saying, you must love me, that doesn't work. Coercion is not love. Love has to be freely given. And that was Jesus' answer.
But what if he appeared in front of us and like he
He
didn't
did. He
just
did. It was called Jesus Christ.
okay. Okay,
And he did all kinds of miracles.
okay. I guess, but
And I want to add, I want to add that
yeah,
in the name of Jesus Christ, I've seen the same kind of miracles that are in the Bible.
like what was the greatest, I guess, miracle that you've personally seen? What was I mean, I guess that's a loaded question. Um,
Well, I was on the Amazon in a village called Nueva Esperanza. Habla español?
sí, casi confluye.
Okay, New Hope. I was in the village New Hope,
Mhm.
very primitive, about 100 people. Um, it was the last village we had visited in a week-long trip of visiting very primitive villages on the Western Amazon. We started in Iquitos, Peru,
Mhm.
and went east. Um, that evening, they invited us to attend their church, which was a thatched roof out in the jungle. Um, and we went there, and we had our team was 30 people, and I think there were 8 U.S. doctors, a whole bunch of nurses, a couple of pharmacologists, um, a few aides, and I was the evangelist. I was it was a medical mission, and they brought me along to talk to people about Jesus Christ. That night, I saw people who hadn't walked get up and dance. I saw people who were deaf. Um, I go on and on and on. We saw many, many miracles, and the doctors were coming to me, and it's like, Pastor, I can't believe it. You won't believe what just happened. I was with a group of people. We prayed over this person who was blind, and now they can see. Pastor, I've never seen anything like it in my life. What's going on here? And I said,
Wow.
calm down. It's God. It's not you. It's not me. God's working here. And we all saw it. It was like, I mean, you asked me, tell me about a miracle I saw. I'm telling you about, we saw a dozen miracles that night. And it wasn't just me, it was doctors, nurses, pharmacists, etc.
And
Okay.
I wish I could experience something like that in
You
person. That
can, you can.
how can I do that?
You start off, go someplace that you consider to be a sacred or holy place.
Mhm.
Now, I suggest to people a church during the weekday when there's nobody there is like a pretty obvious holy place. But for you, it might be on the edge of a river or in the woods or things like that. And by yourself, sit there and tell God everything on your mind, everything good, everything bad. This is known as a confession. You just do a stream of consciousness download to God, you know. And if you want to tell God bad stuff like I hate you, I don't believe in you, do it because he already knows. God knows everything. She's when one of the first things she just told me everything I'd ever thought of, which was like I found that extremely disturbing because there were a lot of things. And I told you, I said a lot of things I've thought that I don't want you to know. And he said, well, I already know them. So
Oh,
Jesus, so
that's
Jesus,
embarrassing. Okay.
Well, let me explain it scientifically to you. God is consciousness. Your consciousness is a little speck in the greater consciousness, also known as universal consciousness, God consciousness, Christ consciousness. You know,
Hmm.
I had a Canadian friend who was India. He used to call it awareness. That what God is awareness. And he's very aware of you and I. And do that download. And then when you've exhausted it and you have nothing more to say, it might take you a while.
It would.
Yeah. Say, I just want to know your love. All I want is your love.
And then what will happen?
And then sit there quietly and just keep saying or thinking that and see what happens. And that'll be the beginning of the miracle.
Okay. I will give it a go and I'll see what happens.
Okay.
And and then my next question for you is this is maybe a difficult question, but how do you how do you define faith? Like what's your definition of faith? And then
Okay. That's a good one. Well, wait a minute. Listen. Don't add on to it.
okay.
Multiple.
Okay,
Faith,
okay.
faith, if you look up the origins of it, as it's used in the Greek and Hebrew, it also means trust. It also means belief. Now, I don't like to use the word believe so much. I like the words faith and trust more because the problem with believe, and it's a perfectly good word. I mean, I don't have anything against it,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it connotes an intellectual understanding. So it's often believe in God, believe in Jesus. Like that's a head thing, right?
Mhm.
I like I like trust and faith more because that infers heart. Like I had a very good mother. I had a lousy father and I had a very good mother. And I trusted her, right?
Mhm.
I mean, 100%, no doubt, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Um, and trust is really important. Like I don't trust politicians. I'm very skeptical of them. I wish I did, you know? Um,
Reasonable to be skeptical of most of them.
yeah. So one of the reasons why I have gravitated towards Christianity, and as you know, I was a pastor for a long time, and I belong to a church which I'm involved with and stuff like that. Is that they tend to be very trustworthy people. Not all of them. There's some rotten people in church.
Mhm.
Sad to say, but they are. But the church is a hospital for sinners. It is not a museum of saints. That's that's an old saying that I'm borrowing from.
Yeah.
So when you go to church, don't expect that everybody there is a saintly person because they are not. But there are saints in church, and so
Mhm.
uh, I like church because I find a lot of trustworthy people there. Um, there was a woman who just retired from the bank that I deal with, and she worked there for 26 years. A wonderful woman. We were really good friends. Coincidentally, a Christian, and she was 100% trustworthy and always gave me good financial advice. Um, so with I am not a wealthy person, but with my small amount of money I have, I'm 77 years old. I got to be pretty careful, because my income is very fixed,
Yeah.
and I got to be careful because I have a wife and I want her, I mean, my biggest asset is my house. And when I die, I've instructed my wife, the first thing you do is sell this house because she can't manage it.
Mhm.
She knows it. And she needs to find herself a decent living situation, and I believe with the sale of the house, there's going to be enough money for her to go into a retirement community. So, by the way, I don't know what it's like in Canada, but our retirement communities are really expensive down here in the United States. So, having this lady at the bank who I trusted, I mean, I was happy to see her. I do mission work in Central America, and I'm still doing it, and it involved transferring
Yeah.
good sums of money back and forth. Anyways,
Yeah.
trusting someone's really important. Well,
Yeah.
trusting God. Here's my favorite scripture. It's Romans 8:28. All things work for God's good purpose for those who love God. And it's like, that is sometimes really hard to swallow because bad things happen to good people. Matter of fact, that's the title of a book written by a rabbi.
Yeah.
And it's true. And we all, when we run into bad things, it's like, really? God? Seriously? Well, anyways, the whole point is that there's a reason. So anyways, I believe learning to trust God. Now, the way that you trust God is by having a loving relationship with God. And you asked me what to do, and I said, go get yourself some God love.
Yeah. And so in a way, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but in a way, maybe you could even say that faith is kind of somewhat based on evidence, right? Because if you trust in God and you start seeing then you start seeing evidence of him in your life, which builds more faith. Could you say that?
You are exactly right. I could
Okay.
tell you miraculous stories, financial
Yeah.
stories of money coming to, for example, I've been doing this work in Belize, Central America for 23 years now, and it's involved a lot of money. I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. I have
Yeah.
never solicited money.
Mm-hmm.
My fundraising is that I tell people about what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Most of the time they say, "Oh, that's really nice,"
Yeah.
and give me maybe a pat.
Wow.
Good dog, good dog. Every once in a while people say, "Oh, can I help you?"
Yeah. So
And
that.
and
Yeah.
then they give me a check for $20, $500, $20,000, whatever. And
It,
that's where the money comes from. It's like,
yeah.
and it always comes at the last minute.
Yeah. 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 Well, it is interesting too, though, because there are people who use that word faith in to say, oh, I have faith in. All right, just to give one example of the worst case, the 9/11 terrorist attacks, right? Those people had faith that God would give them 72 virgins in heaven and they'd go to paradise if they did that. And so you could say that. So, if you ask them, they would say, oh, I have faith. I have faith that God is going to reward me for doing this, so I guess you would say that their faith is invalid because
I agree. I
yeah,
agree. They put their
yeah,
faith in uh, a misguided. I'm trying to be kind here because I don't want to knock our Muslim brothers and sisters, but they put their faith in a misguided theology.
mhm, yeah, yeah, and I guess my question then is they have their faith and then you have your faith, but what's how do you know where to put your faith? I guess is what I'm saying. How do you come to the conclusion of this is
Okay, yeah,
to put?
a good question.
Yeah, yeah,
In the history of the world, there haven't been many atheists. They've always been a tiny minority.
yeah,
Agnostics, I mean, there's been plenty of agnostics, but overwhelmingly in the history of the world, every tribe, every culture, every civilization has had gods or gods, right?
yeah,
And So one of the things that we can do in a rational basis is look at those things. I've read the Quran, I've read Buddhism, I've read Hinduism, I've read
Yeah.
Shintoism, I've looked at all those things. And there's good stuff in those.
Yeah,
There's
there's some
also
good
stuff
stuff.
that makes me go, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Well, to be fair, there's some stuff
but
in the Bible too that isn't like,
in the Old Testament, no.
yeah.
In the Hebrew Testament, there's stuff that I don't believe is from God at all.
Mhm.
And there's also in the Old Testament really good stuff that I think is divinely inspired.
Yeah.
But when I get to the New Testament, which begins with Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John,
Mhm.
I believe that's 100% all good stuff.
Oh yeah, I agree. Yep. Yep.
So the tradition I belong to, I said earlier, I belong to the Judeo-Christian tradition. Actually, I belong to Jesus, you know,
Yeah.
and that's why I like the reformers, because they were, they did a weird thing that the Catholic Church forbade. They started reading the Bible and wanted the faith to resemble what they read in the New Testament and not what the church had become. The church had become
Yeah.
the ruling power of Europe.
Oh yeah.
The church ruled the kings, the church ruled the
Mhm.
princes and nobles and things like that as much
Yep.
as they could. And they ruled the
Yep.
peasants for the vast majority of the population. Um,
Yeah.
control, power are really dangerous things.
Yeah.
Like how, Walter Wilk wrote a book about Protestant theologian that domination, and he wasn't talking about the Catholic Church particularly, just talking about the human nature. Domination, the desire to dominate is the source of real evil. Now, the Greeks, define the source of evil as pride, hubris, right? And I think what Woke was saying, the desire to dominate is really the act of pride.
Yeah. Makes
What's your
sense.
name? I'm sorry, I forgot.
Oh, my name is Scott.
What, Scott?
Scott.
Scott,
Yeah.
me telling you what to do in an attempt to dominate you. Unfortunately, I did tell you what to do. I told you to go see God, but anyways, telling you what to do, trying to control you
Mhm.
is that should send up a red flag.
Mhm.
Now, I'm sure as a scientist, you work with people and
Yep.
you get advice, you get orders and things like that.
Oh
That
yeah.
that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people trying to control your life where it doesn't belong.
Yeah. Okay. And okay, the one of the last questions I had here is something I've been really thinking a lot about because I'm very interested in the history of Christianity and from a historical perspective and the historical Jesus and who he was and things like that. And I've delved deep into this and there's a lot of conflicting scholarly consensus about a lot of different things. One of the things is the authorship of the Gospels of the New Testament. I've read some scholars say, "Oh, they weren't written by the apostles; they were written decades later," or some people think that was the case. So what's I guess I'm asking, what's your opinion on that?
Well, I went to a seminary. I went to a Methodist seminary, and it was very rational based.
Yeah,
Although what they were trying to do was prepare us to be pastors, and so they were, of course, they believed that rationally that we would grow in faith, and in fact,
yeah,
I believe that's exactly what they accomplished.
hmm
Uh, and what I learned was um, probably the four Gospels were written by not the first generation, the 12 apostles, but by their followers, second generation. So,
hmm
uh, but keep and so the four Gospels, they're there are differences between them. And of course, there's the three synoptic gospels, which means one view,
Yeah. Yep.
Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and
Yeah.
they're pretty consistent.
Oh yeah.
And then there's John. Now, John is my favorite gospel, and um, I think John has the possibility of actually being written by the young beloved disciple John. Anyhow, um, so these men who all suffered horrible martyrdom for their attempt to spread Christianity had an extreme reverence for Jesus. I mean, much greater passion for Jesus than I have, because they were so much more courageous. I mean, I don't have half the courage, a tenth of the courage that they had, and what they tried to do, and what they suffered for. But the point is that they had real reverence for it. So basically, I think they were passing down, to the best of their ability, what they believed was the truth as it had been, maybe not firsthand witnesses, but been given to them by the firsthand witnesses.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is that the Bible says, and Jesus told me and showed me that the Gospels are only a tiny fraction of what Jesus actually did. He didn't do
Yeah.
just the miracles in the Bible. He did many, many, many more.
And John said that. John said, I think if all the books, not all
Yes,
the world couldn't contain what,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and he's still doing those miracles because Christianity's been cooking along here for 2,000 years, and there's been, if you added all the Christian stuff, there's been billions of them, and there's been billions of miracles, and there are books out there, including contemporary books of people writing about all the miracles that they've seen and witnessed.
Yeah.
So Jesus is still very much alive and working in this world and doing his work. And what I would like, Scott, for you to see is the miracles that you asked for it. And I'd like you to see the miracles of Jesus, but it begins by you receiving the love of God. We do not, let me go back to my seminary education. We don't make faith. Faith comes from God. Faith comes, it's a package deal. When you get the love of God, all of a sudden you start to trust God and you start to have more faith. And a good thing to pray for is love, faith, and hope. Those are the three biggies. There's a lot of grace. Matter of fact, here, let me be a little bit out there. It's all grace. Life is grace. This world is grace. Everything we experience is grace. That's why when we say all things work for God's good purpose for those who love God, it's all grace. It's a great grace means gift. Okay.
Yeah.
Everything we're getting. So I would put to you that your interest in science is the grace of God. Your knowledge, which as you well realize, is a growing thing. It's a learning thing. And the day you stop growing and learning, you've kind of failed in your scientific task. So let me conclude. My best friend is a doctor. She's just retiring now. She was head of family practice at a big hospital here in Northern Kentucky. Her name's Marianne. She's a Catholic who has a zillion huge problems with the Catholic Church, which we talk about all the time, which is like, it's a little boring, but anyways. But the the point of all this is we had a big discussion about evidence-based decision making. And I said to her, she said, I'm a scientist. I only go by evidence. And I said, Marianne, that's absolutely not true. You rely upon the authority of other people. You know, she's a doctor. This doctor said, you know, I wouldn't use heparin in this particular case as a blood thinner because blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And if she trusts that person, if she believes in their authority based on their evidence-based decision making, she stops with the heparin and changes to a different
Yep.
blood thinner, right?
Yep. Yeah, that's true.
And she's like, well, is she like, well, it depends on the authority. I said, exactly, Marianne. You have to check the authority. You know, you
Yeah.
mentioned earlier, you scholars say this and that and this and that. Check out the authorities. There are scholars who are trying to, from their point of view, demystify
Yeah.
Christianity, but
Yeah.
actually they're not trying to
Yeah.
support Jesus or God or the Bible. They're trying to make their mark by tearing it
Yep.
apart.
Yep.
There were scholars that used to say the Bible was written 200 years after the death of Jesus. We now know conclusively, based on evidence of fragments of scriptures that we found, that the Bible was all written in the first century after Jesus.
Our time's
We
going to run out, guys. I don't want to interject
That's all
here,
right.
Howard, but we got like
That's
30
all right.
seconds.
I'm just getting going here, buddy.
I know. It's always
We
the way,
can
isn't it?
we can reconvene later on, and we'll. 'Cause I kind of want to talk to Howard a little more about this stuff.
Scott, I love talking to you. I mean it.
Thank you. You too. You too. We got to do this again. We got to do this again.
Yeah.
For sure. All right. I'm sorry, guys.
All
Oh,